All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, we meet a grassroots organization, 13th Forward, that is working with elected officials to create an equitable prison labor system for incarcerated workers. Next up, the Legal Aid Society is here to talk to us about a lawsuit on behalf of Bronx tenants that were displaced after a fire tore through their apartments. Finally, we look at legislation that would ban e-bikes and e-scooters in New York City until they could be properly policed. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at bronxnet.tv. 13th Forward is a legislative coalition of advocates that is working toward the passage of two bills, the No Slavery in New York Act and the Fairness and Opportunity for Incarcerated Workers Act. We spoke to campaign leader Wilfredo Laracuente. Check it out. Okay, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have with us Wilfredo Laracuente with 13th Forward. How you doing today, Wilfredo?
I'm doing good today, sir.
All right, so a very interesting topic that we're discussing today. It's basically prison really almost as a form of slavery. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your organization.
Okay. My name is Wilfredo Laracuente, and I represent the 13th Forward. And the 13th Forward is a movement that is looking to stop government and New York State, from being able to circumvent the 13th Amendment. Slavery is going on right now on March 1st, 2023. In New York State as it is. The Department of Corrections, in concert with Coalcraft Industries, is able to circumvent the 13th Amendment, and they're able to go ahead and force men into labor for pennies on the dollar.
Now, who is Coalcraft Industries?
Coalcraft Industries is a conglomerate that's in concert with DOCS that is allowed to go into various correctional facilities and create items. So, for example, the hand sanitizer during the pandemic, a lot of the license plates that are currently being used, the soap, the desks that are being used by the Department of Education to have the children sit down, that are all made by men and women that are inside correctional facilities, and they get paid between 15 cents and 45 cents an hour.
And how would you change this?
Well, I would like to change it by being able to force Coalcraft Industries to, at least at the minimum, being able to use the wages of $7.25 an hour. But me personally, I'm a little more outraged that a lot of SUNY and CUNY schools, as well as Department of Education, who say they are progressive and they want to end mass incarceration, they buy the particular desk and the items that they need for their particular universities and schools from Coalcraft Industries, so they are silently complicit with slavery.
So it's not that you don't want the inmates to do the type of work, it's that you want to make sure they're compensated fairly for the work. Am I correct?
They need to be adequately compensated, and also they need to look at the conditions. So someone outside that is currently would have different regulations. There will be a lot of OSHA training. There will be a lot of things that will be regulated if they were creating these particular products. And nothing is regulated by DOCS, and nothing is regulated, or Coalcraft is not forced to regulate. So they're able to exchange on the New York Stock Exchange. They're able to trade back and forth and have their company become public. And they don't have to worry about the laws that other conglomerates or other companies would have to, that exchanges on the stock exchange.
Well, give me an example of some of those things that they're able to not have to comply with that other corporations would have to.
Okay, so my thing is, there's no set wage. Somewhere there's a minimum wage. Somewhere you have to go by a particular standard of a particular industry in order to pay someone. not Coldcraft. That's why Coldcraft doesn't worry about its overhead or doesn't worry about its bottom line. They can sell the amount of shares that are made or the amount of desks or the amount of license plates at whatever amount they want to, because they know they can cut the cost and they can price gouge against any competition because they're not paying anything for labor. The labor is free. That's how, with the 13th Amendment, with the prison labor, they are circumventing the 13th Amendment, and it is slavery.
Now, prison labor has gone back centuries in this country. Basically, prisoners have been asked to either work on railroads or work on the in different mines, or in many places, in any states, they've been asked to work for small amounts of money, and that's almost really I don't know. Is that a form of punishment, or do you think it's just the way we want them to give back to society as a result of what the crime they've committed?
Okay, so a little bit of context. After the Emancipation Proclamation, what happened with the Jim Crow laws when they came into effect, they started to go ahead and lock people up on the sides of train tracks for vagrancy and petty crimes. And when they realized they had them housed and they were now free labor, they decided to utilize them in various different instances from the beginning of history all the way up until now. So this is something that has gone unchecked for decades. And now all of a sudden it's time to bring awareness. And New York is supposed to be one of these most progressive states. There are other states, as in Alabama or Tennessee, that have gone ahead and closed this loophole to make sure that prison cannot go ahead and use this and make it punitive, because you talked about punishment. So you do the crime, and for a lot of people that believe in punitive punishment, you do the time. Well, if you don't work in these particular programs, there's a lot of disciplinary sanctions and you face retaliation. So it seems that you're being punished all over again for the same exact crime.
So what are you doing to change the system in New York State?
Okay, well, first thing we have to do is have to bring awareness. A lot of people don't understand what's going on. Everyone is really concerned with the economies that are going on in New York City and New York State and their own primary domiciles. But these people, the people that are incarcerated, and also I like to make it's also the women as well. If there is anyone that is talking to someone from the Department of Motor Vehicles that is trying to get something straightened out with their license, they're talking to someone that's housed in the Department of Corrections at a female correctional facility from Albion or from Bedford. So here we are now, the Department of Corrections and Coldcraft in concert are circumventing the 13th Amendment for free customer service. For customer service at pennies on a dollar, and it needs to be stopped. And these people need to be adequately compensated, and there needs to be some type of regulatory or regulations or some type of union in place so they'd be able to go ahead and receive adequate salary.
Are the inmates allowed to form any kind of union, or no?
Not at all. I'm directly impacted by the criminal justice system. I worked for Coldcraft for 8 years. I just returned home after doing 20 years. About 18 months ago, no, there is no way you can unionize, and there's no way you can go ahead and formulate anything.
Do the inmates ever get together and just try and say, well, all of us together shouldn't work, or do they ever have any kind of collective say, or no?
If that happens, then there's disciplinary sanctions that come in, jails get shut down. Then all of a sudden they want to separate that type of behavior, and they'll bring in other people that are going to do jobs at pennies on the dollar.
Has anyone reached out to either New York State, whether that's the governor's office or anyone else, about putting forth some kind of legislation that would change the mandatory work that has to be done by the inmates?
Well, the 13th
it's not really
Fordward,
mandatory, but if you don't do it, you say you get punished.
The 13th Fordward has put in 2 pieces of legislation. The first being to go ahead and close up the loophole of them being able to use prison labor as free slave labor. And also there was another bill that's on the floor on behalf of the 13th Fordward that organizations like Fortune Society and other non-profit and prison advocacy groups that got behind, where they want to talk about creating this particular, I want to say also it's like an unemployment office inside facilities where they're able to go ahead and charge or be able to give an adequate wage for people that are inside, and be able to have these commissions and be able to have these think tanks to go ahead and provide adequate skills. Because the reality is, and the data is clear, everyone is going to come home. But if you don't go ahead and provide the men and women with the particular skills they need to assimilate into society effortlessly and assimilate back into the workforce, then what you're going to do is you're just going to pass off that particular person to another part of the institution that's going to have to be government institution that's going to be able to support them upon the release.
All right, well, Wilfredo Laracuente, 13th Fordward, I want to thank you very much for being here. You shed some light on a very interesting topic, and maybe you come back in a couple of months and let us know what's going on.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has so much more right after this. All right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet me at David Lesh. In September of 2022, a fire ravaged a Bronx building, causing tenants to be displaced and put into a shelter. A lawsuit was filed as a result. Russell Crane from the Legal Aid Society is here to tell us more. Russell, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about this building. Has this building always had issues? Maybe a little bit of background, if you could.
Yes, this building's had a long history of having problems. So in 2014, the building was placed into a program that HPD has called the Alternative Enforcement Program. That program is specifically designed for severely distressed buildings. And HPD found that there were a number of building-wide issues that needed to be addressed, including rewiring the building, including fixing floor joists, including putting on a new roof. And this building has been in that program since 2014, so that's almost 10 years of being in a program.
How do you get into the program? Like, does somebody call 311, or are you alerted some way? How do we know that a building like this should be in a program?
So the city's alternative enforcement program, as I said, is meant for severely distressed buildings. So it would be coming out of a number of housing code violations that the city is issuing for that building. And I think when inspectors are there and they're seeing that this is a very neglected building with a lot of problems.
All right, so now you find out that the building has problems. Do you alert the tenants as to what their rights may be and what they can now do, or do you just come in there and tell the owners to just fix things up immediately? What's the next phase?
Right. Well, I mean, in this case, so the city had the program in the alternative enforcement program since 2014, and they had their own litigation against the owner. They had cases for false certifications of violations, for failing to provide heat and hot water to tenants, for needing to get access to remediate lead paint. So that all happened before the fire in September 2022 that you referenced.
Well, let's talk about the fire itself. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know that we know exactly what happened. Tenants do believe that there was an electrical problem that caused the fire, and the fire sort of has, the building sort of has two wings to it. And so the fire that was started on one side of the wing, caused severe damage in that entire wing of the building. And what was really, horrific about this situation is that tenants, smelled the smoke and were trying to get out, went downstairs, and an emergency door they found locked, and they could not get out. And that was actually a violation that the city had cited the landlord for.
Were there fatalities as a result of the fire, or mostly smoke inhalation? What exactly happened?
Thankfully, there were no fatalities. Smoke inhalation for sure. One of our clients' adult sons was injured trying to escape. But no fatalities. So that is good. But trauma, of course, loss of possessions, a whole life's worth of things that tenants don't have anymore.
So what's legal aid doing as a result?
Well, so we have tenants have asked for our help to have the landlord make the repairs that are needed so that they can return to their home. So after the fire, because of the damage to the building, tenants were displaced. Many of them are now living in city shelters, and they just want to go back to their homes. Some of them have lived there for decades.
I understand that many of them are very unhappy because they're not happy with the shelter shelter situation. What can you do for them in the meantime?
Well, I mean, we that's why we filed a court case. Right. We are going to ask a judge, to make sure that the landlord does the repairs as quickly as possible so that tenants are able to return home. I
see in these types of cases when it comes to fire or potential fires, the landlords don't have the smoke alarms that are supposed to be there. They don't have a sprinkler system that's supposed to be there. And the worst offense is always that the doors don't shut they automatically stay open because the fire spreads and the smoke ends up going throughout the building. Do you find this to be the situation in this type of building as well?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, my work is working with groups of tenants throughout the Bronx, as it sounds like you have too.
Yeah.
I've seen this problem time and again, and unfortunately that is the case here too, where there are violations for lack of working smoke detectors and other violations for not having self-closing doors.
So I see you have the lawsuit was filed against Shukurt Deduvac, Paul Deduvac, and Creston Real Estate Advisors Incorporated. What type of ramifications will this have? Will they not be able to purchase buildings in the future? Will there other buildings be looked at to make sure that they're in compliance? What usually happens when legal aid brings a lawsuit like this?
Well, we're certainly now alerted to this particular landlord and other buildings they have. In fact, just this week, the same landlords manage the neighboring building. We went out to meet with tenants to see.
And what'd you see there?
Unfortunately, the same kinds of situations.
Doors doors either illegally locked or not locking or something else.
All of those kinds of problems. From vermin infestations to floors that are very unlevel. So just
we were talking about this off camera about the HPD violations and infestation. I've seen a lot of bedbug cases in my office. It's almost like you make a 311 complaint and nothing sometimes happens, and only the worst case scenario brings somebody, unfortunately, like you out there to be able to bring a lawsuit and to remedy the situation. Is there anything we could do to quicken or to really? I mean, listen, it's much different than being bit by bed bugs and obviously dying by smoke inhalation or burning in a fire. But what can we do to better protect, I think, the tenants, certainly of the Bronx?
Well, so I'm a staff attorney in the Legal Aid Society's Housing Justice Unit, the Group Advocacy Unit. So we, and along with other legal services organizations, receive funding from the city to do work with groups of tenants, affirmative work where there are repair problems, where there are rent overcharges, things like that. We are available to represent whole groups of tenants, and that's separate from the funding that legal aid and legal services receive to represent tenants in eviction cases. So it's a very important part of funding that the city provides to protect tenants and to stop landlord harassment.
All right, so let's say somebody's watching today, and somebody's watching and they think they have a building that has violations all over, and they may end up encountering, having some kind of issue where they may need to call you. What would you tell them to do? Do they first file complaints? Do they call the police? Who do they go to first?
Well, we always tell tenants as a first step, when you're not getting a response from a landlord to your request for repair, I mean, it's fine. Reach out to the super, try to get the repair done. Of course, it's the Bronx, and that doesn't happen a lot of the time. And so don't wait. I mean, call 311. Getting a violation documented, landlords don't like that.
No, they don't.
And so once it's on record, that creates a whole other series of things that can happen. The city might bring their own case because they take note of the violations. They could be the landlord could be hit with civil penalties. But not only that, it's just a matter of record, and it helps the tenant, later when they want to say, I've been living these terrible conditions, and here's the evidence because there's violations from several months ago.
Violations is key to every lawsuit.
Absolutely.
Legal Aid, you guys have been doing great work, and Russell Crane, you in particular. Maybe you come back and tell us how things are going the next couple of months.
I'd be happy to, and thanks for having me on again.
It's my pleasure. All right, we have to take a quick break, but up next, Councilman Robert Holden tells us about a bill that would ban electric bikes and scooters in New York City. We'll be right back.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
All right, last year, electric scooters and bikes were the cause of 216 fires, and 6 New Yorkers died because of them. Councilman Robert Holden from the 30th District recently introduced legislation that would ban e-bikes and e-scooters from the city. He is here to tell us more. I want to welcome Robert Holden. Robert, thanks for being here today.
Great to be here.
All right, let's get right to it. I have a 12-year-old in the city. I'm constantly telling him to be careful while he's crossing the street. I let him know that just because the light is red doesn't mean that an e-bike or an e-scooter is not going to come right through and hurt him, and to be almost more worried about the e-bikes and the e-scooters than the automobiles, because they'll stop at the red light. Tell me your impetus for this particular bill, if you could.
Well, if you're walking around New York City or even driving around New York City, you have to have eyes in the back of your head now. So, like you said, crossing the street is now, it's a hazard. And the worst place to be, the most dangerous place to be in New York City is in the crosswalk. Most of the people that are getting hit by vehicles, including cars, trucks, are in the crosswalks. But now you have these e-scooters and e-bikes and you name it, people on these electric vehicles think that because they're not registered, because you don't have to have a license, because they're not insured, they can just not observe any traffic laws, do anything they want, go up one-way streets, run red lights, you name it, they're doing it. There's no controls. And what the city council made a mistake in 2020 was putting no restrictions on these vehicles. Yeah, they said you have to observe traffic laws, but good luck doing that, because I would say most of the people that ride these vehicles are not observing any traffic laws. But the worst thing now is they're bringing them into their apartments, into buildings, and they're charging them with these unsafe chargers apparently, and causing multiple fires, and like you said, killing people. So you have chances of getting killed on the streets and then now in your apartment because of these.
So now they're in the commercial fabric now of New York, right? I mean, all our food is delivered this way, all our fast food and takeout, messengers. How do we take a step back to try and do something to regulate the industry now where it's become such a fabric of New York?
Well, these are for bikes that go under 25. Technically, if it goes over 25, you have to have a license, insurance, and so forth, registration. So what I'm saying is we have to stop it in its tracks right now. And the first thing we have to do is just repeal that 2020 bill and then go back to the drawing board. And that could be at the same time. That means we could have a similar bill that the state has to put this one through to just make the owner of these 25 and under bikes, miles per hour, register, get a license, and get insurance. And that, so let's say a restaurant would just have to do that. They'd have to get either over 25 mile an hour vehicles right away, or if they have the under 25, just simply, get insurance and so forth and register them.
Where's the pushback coming from?
Well, it's coming from the bike advocates, because there's these e-bikes that people are riding, and they go fast, by the way. And I think
sure, they're very fast.
Yeah, and like you said, you're crossing the street, and you look, you're looking for vehicles. All of a sudden, somebody comes from behind you, traveling down the wrong way on the street, and could hit you. And that's been happening. People are getting killed. Pedestrians are getting killed. There's multiple accidents. Can't have this free for all in New York City. It's mayhem on the streets. So let's get smarter here. Let's regulate them. That's all I'm saying here.
And I also see the insurance as a big issue, because I've had cases in my office where people come to me all the time and they get hit by there's pedestrians and they get hit, and there's no insurance. There's no recourse.
And that's why they flee. When they hit someone, they're not insured. So they're personally responsible for this if they stop. So that's why so many people flee. I just don't see, anything. We have to, go back to the drawing board on that.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say we get more police involved, and we have people on the different streets giving out these types of tickets. Do you think that'll make a difference, as opposed to just banning them? Is there any in between that we could do?
Well, I brought that up with my local precinct, and you know what they say?
What?
They say, cops say, we can't chase them.
Right.
And first of all, you don't announce that to the world or to everyone that you're not going to chase them, because that's what they want to hear. So they just take off. I had one that was doing one of these. It was a 4-wheel, and they're illegal, by the way. the ATVs, but they were doing wheelies in front of a school, and I was standing outside the school with a police commanding officer, and he said, "Well, yeah, we can't chase them." I said, "What are you doing? That guy's going back and forth. Why don't you at least get guys on both sides, cops on both sides of the the intersections here, and stop them?" "Oh, we can't chase them. So he's gonna flee." And so again, that's a ridiculous situation.
It is like the Wild West. It really is.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine anybody who doesn't ride an e-bike not supporting the bill, not supporting the repeal, should I say?
Well, here's what the advocates, the ones that are really pro electric vehicles or pro bicycles, what they say is cars are much more dangerous.
Big cars stop at lights.
Right, most cars do.
Well, they try to, and then there's stop signs, and cars are much more dangerous. But at the same time, I think more accidents are caused by these e-bikes and e-scooters than car accidents. If you look at per capita of the amount of bikes on the road.
Yeah, percentage, sure, because I think most of us will agree that if you see an e-bike or e-scooter or a moped stop at a light, you're surprised, because I have a window out, like a couple of windows in my office. I'm looking out on an intersection, and I know, they're not going to stop. And I would say 90% don't stop at traffic lights.
All right, so final thoughts. What look in your crystal ball. What are the odds that this ends up happening, that you're able to repeal it?
I think it'll happen, but it's going to take more deaths, and that's unfortunate.
That is unfortunate.
I think people are going to reach a point where we got to stop this. And I'm just, I had a fire in my district, and there was a daycare, and 18 kids were hurt. One is still in critical condition because of the fire, and that was in like a one-family dwelling. It's just imagine again a fire, like the Twin Parks, fire.
Horrible.
That's what it might take. I'm hoping it won't.
Right. All right. Well, Councilmember Robert Holden, I want to thank you very much for being here, and hopefully you can come back and we could have another discussion with you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks so much.
It's our pleasure. All right. We have to take a quick break, but we'll have more when we come back. Don't go anywhere. All right, I hope you enjoyed that segment. That's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesh. And make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. Take care.